Good morning, or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're joining us from. A very warm welcome to our Experience in Flux webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Bronwyn Penny. I'm a Senior Insights Manager here at Humanate, and I'll be your host today. Today, I'm joined by my colleagues Christoph Vichelt, who's our EMEA Experience Expert, as well as Scott Lee, who's our Head of Customer Experience. And just by the way, Scott is actually celebrating his birthday today. So happy birthday,
Oh,
Scott. Thanks so
thank you.
much
Thank you
for
so much.
sharing
Didn't know
part
you'd
of your
mentioned that,
day.
but yeah, thank you.
Okay, so together we'll be exploring how understanding Gen Alpha today can help us to design better customer experiences for everyone tomorrow. So, Scott and Christoph will look at what it is that makes this generation unique, from being true experience natives to how their mindset is already reshaping consumer expectations
Mm.
across categories. They'll share two experience design platforms that bring these insights to life with fresh examples and practical takeaways. Just before we dive in, I'll share a few quick practical notes. The session is being recorded, and you'll receive the recording shortly after we wrap up. If you have any questions during the session, please do use the question tab on the right-hand side, and you can also upvote questions and react using emojis. Also, any comments, fun reactions, please feel free to use the chat. So with that, let's get started, and I'll hand it over to Scott and Christoph.
Thank you so much, Bronwyn, and thank you. Well, I don't know who was doing little birthday celebrations in the chat, but thank you very much for that. Let's kick off. Yeah. So why experience? Why bother focusing on experience today? Well, experience matters for your brand perhaps more than you may think. For decades, marketeers, we've believed that advertising basically builds brands. And actually, what we've discovered, we've run a big study, thousands of consumers around the world, taking the pulse on experiences today. And showing you one of the results here from the UK, 61% of people said that the way a brand treats people matters more than what it sells. So, the reality is a bit more nuanced, and other industry studies have also shown that experiences account for about three-quarters of brand perceptions, while paid media contributes just a quarter. So, every app interaction, every customer service call, every product encounter shapes how people see your brand and, far more than your latest advertising campaign, perhaps. So, there's a bit of a reality to the way marketing's working these days. So, experiences matter, and we're going to really be diving into experiences today. And to give you a little bit of a heads up of what we'll be covering, well, I'm going to talk a little bit about liquid expectations to set the scene. And then Christoph, who has some Gen Alpha kids at home, I think he's going to be sharing a bit about Gen Alpha, because Gen Alpha are a great inspiration. The most fluid generation today, they're a great inspiration for this new world of liquid expectations. And you'll see that we finally sort of use that to land on some really important themes that can drive brand success today, which is personalized journeys and signature delights. So with that, let's get cracking. So, well, as many of I mean, we all know this, that technology has made it, much more affordable, really, for companies to be more customer centric today, to deliver more customer centric experiences. The classic, of course, is Amazon, one-click ordering, same-day delivery, frictionless returns. Amazon really ushered in a whole era of kind of tech-driven convenience. And, we look, kind of post-COVID now, even our doctor's visits, right, are starting to follow that kind of path of immediacy and convenience with the likes of telemedicine. So things are getting easier to be more customer centric. That's one thing, but it's also raising the stakes, right? Consumers are expecting more and more. We're seeing that in our experience study that we did globally at the Humanate here. The expectations are rising across not just geographies and also demographics, but across sectors. So, for example, this is just quoting from the UK data in our global study, but 67% of consumers in the UK say that past experiences raise their expectations for the brands they interact with across sectors, regardless of sector. which is pretty amazing. So what it means is that expectations are what some people call are becoming more liquid, becoming increasingly liquid. In other words, your brand is no longer just compared to the competitors in your sector and your category with regards to experience. And that may seem, maybe that seems obvious, but actually many of the clients we work with, they're still benchmarking their experiences, their satisfaction within the category. And when you think about it and you step back, and I don't know about you, but often when I'm sort of ordering an Uber and then I'm sort of checking stuff on my banking app and maybe ordering some of the groceries, you do really flip between one sector and another, literally on your phone, don't you, on a daily basis? And that's what's happening. People are starting to compare those experiences across all sectors. And it's interesting as well because it's also with technology kind of melting everything and driving these rising expectations. There's also why technology is driving younger generations to have more influence. Some might say outsized influence in some households. And again, in our global study, we found that 81% of adults admitted that they ask younger people, I think they define younger people as under 25, for advice on technology and digital experiences. So things are moving so quickly, people are having to turn to youngsters to get advice on how things work. And actually, 51% of parents and grandparents admitted that kids now influence their purchasing decisions across a lot of different product categories. Which product category most? Well, it was 64% for food. And the lowest, actually not that low, was 38% for banking. So even a serious topic like banking, kids have got plenty of
Mhm.
outsized influence today. But it's not just about influencing the household and those daily household decisions. What's interesting about young people and also Gen Alpha is that they're also helping us reflect on where the future of experiences is flowing. And if we look at, for example, Gen Alpha, which is everyone under 15, I believe, they are in some ways the most fluid of generations today. They're raised on real-time recommendations, interactive content, and some say they're not just digital natives, they're kind of experiential natives. They really represent the future of where experiences are going. And so on that, I'd like to just hand over to Christoph, who can unpack a little bit about what do we see going on with Gen Alpha that might give us some tips on the way experiences are heading in this new liquid reality.
Thank you, Scott. So I have two Gen Alphas at home with a boy of 11 and a boy of 12. So some of the things I will share in a minute, I do witness them every single day. So now let us look what makes them so particular. To start with, I think that's known. They are very known for how fluently they work with touchscreens, voice assistants, and any other tech platform they use already from infancy. So many interacted with touchscreens even before they learn to speak. Now I have a little example here that makes it, I think, very, very clear. So for them, seamless digital interaction isn't that impressive. It's a basic expectation. Having that said, of course, there's also kind of a counterforce. Many are also now trying to balance screen time with moments that more feel real, tactile, and human. Where we learned that 43% of Gen Alpha say they enjoy time away from screens and crave offline activities. But beyond screens, many of this generation have also grown up interacting with AI. We could even call them generation AI. Now, research shows that 1 in 2 8 to 11-year-olds have already used generative AI tools. So that makes AIs for them not just a tool, it's much more. It's a sidekick, a co creator, even an imagination amplifier. As a Gen Xer, I might see AI as a way to complete tasks. It's all about productivity. Or for them, it sparks ideas, it fuels storytelling as an extension of their own creativity and imagination. Now, look at this girl here. She's just 8 years old and she's using Cursor AI, building her own website. So this goes very, very fluently. And just like this, she's building that website without having had any coding experience before. That makes that the barrier to creativity is low now. It has never been easier for them to create their own content. They increasingly want to then become co-authors with brands. But it doesn't mean that brands don't have a role to play in personalizing content to them. To the contrary, we learned that 72% of the parents of Gen Alpha say their child expects content made just for them. And that's no surprise. They are growing up in a world where everything adapts to them. From the shows they stream to the learning tools they use, they are used to content and platforms that mold themselves to their preferences, behaviors, and even moods, and all of this in real time. So brand relevance comes from more kind of fluid, precise alignment with who they are right now, not who they were yesterday. As such, they prefer brands that know their preferences and adopt smartly accordingly. Now, from another study, we got that 3 out of 5 say they learn best through videos and games. It means that Gen Alpha prefer dynamic, sensory, layered content for learning over more kind of the static, text-heavy formats, how I used to learn in the past. So when they're exposed to content that is much more immersive, curiosity-driven, and rich in sensory stimulation, they don't just engage, they really go deep. Parents and educators might be concerned on this, on the negative influence of technology among these young kids. It might diminish their attention span. And you might have heard in this context about the term brain rot before. Now, look at this boy, how he is processing information across his two screens very fluently at the same time. This boy has developed a filter, a very powerful, hyper-selective filter, quickly tuning out anything that doesn't captivate or feel immediately relevant. So what's happening here is not necessarily a diminishing of his attention span, but rather a reshaping of focus. So, in summary, across the 4 themes, we can say that Janava represents the coming together, the coalescing of digital and human, the new human, some say. So, for
Mm.
brands, that means a lot. It sets a new bar to deliver a different type of brand experience, which is more fluid, dynamic, personalized, and immersive. Now, back to you, Scott.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? I think, well, with several kids at home here as well, I can say it's sort of amazing and bewildering and worrying, and probably I think a lot of parents feel like that. But it really feels like we're on a kind of a cusp of just such massive change in how we all interact with things, and I think Gen Alpha there provide a very, sort of concentrated window of where that change is happening. And a couple of themes that I think come out. It sounds like personalization, is something that comes really naturally to that generation, right? They've grown up with Netflix and all these things. But as we'll see, it's not just Gen Alpha that, for whom, the rising importance of personalization is happening. And on the other side here, if you thought that Gen Alpha was the only, young people, kids were the only people who want fun and immersive experiences, then think again. All generations today, I think we're all looking for a bit more delight and a bit more fun in our lives today. So let's take a look at each of these kind of threads in turn and see how they start to play out for all generations. So what we're seeing on our global experiences study is that personalization, it's been around a long time, hasn't it? But it's becoming less of just a feature and more of a default, particularly with the advent of AI, as you'd expect. And people, as we'll see, people are really wanting brands to know them, to anticipate them, and to really evolve with them through their lives. And we saw this earlier this year, actually, if you recall, any of you, the Humanate What Matters trend report for 2025. It really showed the importance of empowerment, for example, and autonomy for consumers. And at the time, we had a trend called curated choices, actually, which was talking to the fact that there's been kind of decades of choice overload. And people are just shifting from more and more and more to hold on, only what matters, please. Fewer, better, more meaningful options that align with what I need, my values, my interests. So we've already seen this kind of underlying shift happening, and the recent study we did, as I said, the Global Humanate Experiences study, started to build further evidence of that in terms of the expectations for personalized journeys across generations. So this is a a quote. This is a percentage from the UK. So 66% of consumers in the UK saying that they really expect personalized experiences today, personalized to who they are and what they need. And actually, another 70% said, look, brands should adapt their communication and offerings based on my needs. And finally, quite high in the UK, actually, almost two-thirds, 61% said, look, generic customer experiences leave me feeling a bit frustrated. So, there's this underlying kind of trend going on. But what's interesting is that, when we look at what brands are doing today, and many of the projects where we do desk research, we look at the experiences that are happening for clients and industries today. I would say many are quite generic, actually. I mean, you can see an example here from some work we did for insurance renewals. And it's a really kind of manual process, quite reactive, kind of a one size fits all experience for people renewing their insurance policies in this particular instance. And it really shows the opportunity to create value by having a more, personalized approach. And recent studies have also shown that even in pretty heavily regulated industries like this, like insurance, there are brands that are getting ahead of the pack, that are leapfrogging competitors by starting to really put personalization into things. So to help companies see beyond that kind of one size fits all journey, we've been doing a lot of desk research around alphas. Christoph shared kind of the tip of the iceberg there, but we've been condensing a lot of research on Gen Alphas to really distill where these experiences are going, particularly in regards to personalization. And we created what we call these personalization codes that we can use for inspiration on projects to help clients see beyond the one size fits kind of journeys that they have at the moment, providing them kind of a leading edge consumer window through the eyes of Gen Alpha at the outset of a project. And Christoph, if you're going to share a little bit, I think, on how our research played out and the types of personalization design codes and principles that we have seen inspired by Gen Alpha, right?
Yes, I would love to. So we had these four Gen Alpha themes, and complemented with further desk research, then we were able to identify four different experience design principles that the brand can use as a starting point and to move from static to more kind of dynamic, personalized journeys. So the first one we labeled identity paths. So this is about a more kind of personalized response that the brand delivers to grow with you as your identity, as your values evolve over time. With co-created tracks, we mean personalization as the outcome of collaboration, where you become a co-author with the brand for your own experience. Sensory synchrony is about different senses coming together to meet your particular needs in a given moment or context or situation. And the last one, anticipatory care, is about a smart, emotionally intelligent personalization that anticipates your needs, actually, even before you're able to voice it yourself. Each of these principles is driven by an underlying consumer insight. So we were able to articulate these consumer insights, and then we did quantify these on the general population throughout key markets around the world to learn how valid these are, not only for Gen Alpha, but across generations. For example, here, results depicted hold for UK. We see that 69% of the general population in UK relates to the insight that is linked to the first design principle, identity paths. Now, also looking at the other numbers, they all show to be high, pretty high. So it turns out that these personalization principles inspired by Gen Alpha are relevant to all generations and also hold power for a multitude of companies and brands. So at Humanate, we define these principles by combining numerous sources, and we see them as platforms, really powerful platforms to push our regular research project deliverables far beyond just regular journey maps. They are now somehow inspiration springboards to personalize the journeys of our clients in a much more meaningful and distinctive way. Obviously, we had much more than just kind of the initial articulation of design principles. Now let's have a quick look and we'll zoom in on the last one, anticipatory care. So this personalization principle is about that smart, emotionally intelligent personalization that anticipates your needs using either predictive intelligence, behavior signals, contextual cues, whatever that helps to meaningfully personalize. In our survey in UK, 78% of consumers stated that a great brand experience is when a company solves a problem before I even notice it. Now, for each of these design principles, we have much more depth that we use then to personalize the journeys of our human-aid clients. So it starts with the underlying consumer insight, which here is about people wanting brands to be proactive and solve problems almost magically before they arise. Then we have also listed potential applications and inspirations that we collected from different industries. For example, smart nudges that you might know from health and well-being companies, or helpful suggestions from e-commerce platforms. And finally, we have experience guardrails. Here highlighting the importance of getting the right balance in anticipation between what feels on the one hand supportive versus intrusive. So this is now the type of content that we bring into ideation sessions with our clients when making journey maps, not just static, but really dynamic, working towards personalized pathways. Now, if you look around, you see some examples of brands stepping into this from various industries. So a couple of them depicted here, but let me highlight one which I really like, which is about Starbucks. They have an AI engine, they call it Deep Brew, and that is analyzing not only purchase history of that single client, but also taking into account local weather, other signals into the moment to suggest menu items that are really personalized at that particular moment in time. So by applying experience design principles like this, by seeking inspiration from this type of stories, we can bring inspiration to our clients to move beyond the typical static journey maps.
Thanks, Christoph. Yeah, I love that name, Deep Brew, for the the AI for Starbucks. It's great, and that's right. You know, applying these kind of possibilities, these inspirations, at the front of a project can really start to help you bring inspiration up, you know, in up front. And I think that sets the tempo for approaching customer experience projects in a slightly different way, is what I've found. And you know, even when you go on to actually do some interviewing, engage consumers, I think you can really start to reframe journeys in different ways and perhaps make a break from perhaps the traditional ways that we've done it. You know, for example, we were recently talking to some consumers on our collective community in the US and UK about their experiences in learning. So, learning about different things in life, whether that's a new hobby or interest, learning to drive a car, or something serious like, you know, an investments or finances. And what we found was really good. You know, we were able to sort of step back into the process of learning that people experience in their daily lives, and get new perspectives. And this the sort of circular, cyclical, archetypal learning journey that you see here, a more sort of dynamic view of how people learn, people coming in at, you know, different entry points, some people getting frustrated and sort of bottoming out, other people getting into a sort of a moment of flow and then spinning around maybe. But you can see it starts to offer a more sort of dynamic way, a more personalized way of looking at experiences and journeys as we go in and we start to talk to people, and unpack different experiences. And in this case, we went on to apply that personalization code, anticipatory care that Christoph just articulated, to learning about finances and investments. And we've got an example here where, to be honest, we were doing a bit like what you saw that Gen Alpha 8-year-old girl doing, you know, doing some coding. That was, we took a leaf out of Gen Alpha's book, literally, and did a bit of vibe coding on learning about finances to see what would come up. And on this project, ended up with just creating lots of different prototypes, apps that you can see here using vibe coding. But just to give you an example of how you can start to, you know, sort of riff off these things, and we had an example here which is quite interesting. So this prototype here, overwhelm detection, auto simplification, it basically detects from when people, you know, when their sort of their focus drops on an investment site, when the frustration seems to set in, and automatically initiates a kind of a simpler user experience. and has a calm mode and things like that if people are panicking about their investments, and it initiates plainer explanations of investment concepts. So, this is the sort of thing we're now able to do. This is just an illustration, but the sort of thing you can do on the fly, as you're investigating journeys, looking at possibilities in the middle of field work and inserting them into discussions with consumers. What about this? Would this type of personalization work for you? So it's really different, to be honest, to how I used to do journey mapping. Over the years, it's become actually much more exciting in many ways and much more creative. So in the end, I think, as I said, the way that journey mapping, customer experience is working is changing, and consumers' expectations are going up. That the traditional way we've done journeys, or sort of static, quite linear way, is starting to evolve, and that's great because as we've seen, generic touch points are not enough. They're leaving consumers feeling disengaged. So the process has to match the increasingly liquid expectations of consumers out there. Now, ultimately, let's finish off on personalization then. So, I think personalization has a massive opportunity to boost relevance, drive growth for your brands out there. Not just us, but studies are showing that, brands that lead in personalization will see up to 30% higher engagement, up to 15%, revenue growth. So it's a fantastic area to explore as you do more experience work and see how you can really boost your brand through personal relevance and personalization. But remember, we had another theme, didn't we? So let's move on to the other theme that was inspired by Gen Alpha, and that was fun and delight, and probably all the things we did over the summer holidays. So now, as I said, fun and delight is not only for Gen Alpha or kids. Today, a lot of people, a lot of consumers of all ages are looking for more than basic satisfaction, just sort of basic utility. They want experiences that bring them emotion, that bring them joy more than ever, I think, in the world we live in today. And it's interesting, some of you, I'm sure, aware of some of the behavioral science, but it's worth a reminder that the peak end rule, so-called peak end rule, shows that we just simply don't remember experiences as a kind of average of scores. We remember the story, we remember the peaks of the experience, and sometimes the peaks can make up for the troughs. I would say, I always remember the Disneyland fair and fireworks at the end, but you forget some of the cues, for example. So people remember the story, they remember the peaks and the peak ends of an experience, and that's pretty important. And we saw again already from our Humanate What Matters 2025 report, another big trend was micro joys, and that some of you may remember. And people looking for more kind of little lifts in their everyday lives and more emotion from experiences with brands. So we've already seen this trend bubbling away, and it continues again to bubble away in our global Humanate experience study we recently did. As you can see from this percentage here, this data from the UK again, 80% say they value small moments of surprise or joy in their interactions with brands. There was also another stat here, 81% remember brands that go above and beyond to delight them. So yeah, as I said, I think everyone's looking for a little bit more of a lift in their lives. And I think what's interesting is we've been doing a number of delight projects. What I've learned is that delight isn't just about kind of fun or joy or just sort of very transactional things. There's actually a lot of ways you can introduce delight in more subtle and more holistic ways. And again, Christoph, we can get some inspiration, right, from Gen Alphas on some of the sort of more nuanced delight design principles or codes that we can employ to give our brand some lift, right?
That's true, Scott. So again, we took our understanding of Gen Alpha and then we're able to translate these in a couple of design principles here to create these brand signature delight moments. The first one we have listed is what we call milestone magic, bringing delight by celebrating personal moments or achievements with cues and feedback that is really meaningful at that moment of time to the particular client. Surprise sparks is about bringing joy through smaller sparks of surprise, which you haven't seen coming, to break through what is predictable, to break through the everyday. Peer power is all about shared passion and the social context, with authentic peer driven connections fueling joy around these shared passions. And with sensory refresh, this is all about adding tactile, either low stimulation or sensory interaction that offer moments of grounding and emotional relief. Again, each of these principles hold true across generations. As we see here, the figures from our survey for UK showing that at least 55%, even up to 72% of the overall total population in UK supports the statements behind these delight experience principles. Now, let us zoom in on the last one, sensory refresh. So this is about infusing these playful pauses that help people recenter themselves within the journey. Again, for each of these delight design principles, as for sensory refresh, we have articulated the underlying consumer insight, which is here the need for slowness, the need for reconnection in a world that is extremely loud. So the sensory code is not about making things even louder or brighter or colorful, to the contrary. And we have listed different applications across sectors and key guardrails, again, as inspirational springboard when we create delight experiences for our clients. And we see some very nice brand manifestations of sensory refresh across different industries. So let me take maybe one here, Lululemon on the top left, which is a Canadian apparel brand you might not know. But what they do very nicely in the stores is making it more kind of a mind philosophy space in sync with their overall brand promise. And it offers then guided meditation and mindful practices, of course, next to the opportunity of buying their stuff. Or McDonald's, that's the example in the center. You don't see here the typical big M. So they have created billboards without any logo, without any messaging, only diffusing their iconic smell. So only work with that kind of scent that make things work. So clearly going beyond the obvious, creating delight on this sensory refresh design principle.
Yeah,
Back
that's
to
a
you,
great.
Scott.
Thanks, Christoph. That's a great example, I think, because there's often with delight we think of just making things louder or brighter, and I think that sensory refresh really shows that it actually people want something more subtle, right? They want something a little bit more meaningful. So yeah, that's great. And I think look, indeed, these are the sort of inspirations we've been using on projects right at the get-go to say, look, how can we reimagine? Where could we create those peaks in the experience? And one of the things we've learned actually that is that there's a temptation, I suppose, just to sort of ask customers or consumers, what could we do to delight you? And I guess what we've found is that that sort of rather simplistic direct approach doesn't work. I guess it's a bit like asking people, what could I surprise you with for your birthday? But it just doesn't work. We have to approach things differently than perhaps the way we've done it in the past, where it was a little bit more operational, talking about pain points, etc. And so we tend to approach things a little bit differently when we're trying to help our clients create these peaks, these moments of delight. You've seen those delight codes, so often we will apply those right at the beginning of a project. Many clients already have, some or past studies, information on their existing journeys, and we can work with that alongside these types of delight codes to start to reimagine things before we even talk to any more consumers or do any more primary research. And that's very helpful. That helps to show where we could kind of elevate things. And then when we do talk to consumers, what we've found is we tend to try to go beyond what I would say the immediate transactional customer journey, which is often very familiar to clients, and step into the wider context, into people's lives, into things that are happening around that experience that they really care about or they enjoy, because that's where you can connect to more meaningful delight beyond just the simple transactional customer experience. And then finally, it's all about just insights and ideas is one thing, but we really also making more and more effort to land these potential delights into specific concepts that we can test, so that clients know, look, if I'm going to give everyone a free teddy bear at some point, whatever it happens to be, it's worth investing in that, and that's great. You start to build the concepts, use AI a lot for that, and we've seen that delight propositions having the potential to raise NPS by up to 20 points for some brands. So approaching things in a very different way is key to understanding where you have the potential to delight. And I sometimes say, look, it feels to me like we've entered a bit of a new phase of customer experience where fixing pain points is no longer enough. I mean, obviously you do need to fix pain points, but it's not the only game. Really, to set yourself apart from the competition, you need to create those peaks as well. And indeed, some studies have shown in the industry that elevating peaks can drive 8 times more revenue than just fixing the pains, because that's what people remember, right? They remember those peaks, the fireworks and the fairs at the end of the Disneyland parade, for example. So yeah, ultimately, to wrap up on delights, delights is all about creating moments that matter to people, that connect to their lives. And you know uh, today, the biggest predictor of growth isn't really about just how satisfied people are, of course, but it's how distinctive you can make that experience, where you can introduce these aspects. And again, studies have shown that the ability to delight, you can amplify loyalty on NPS, just as we've seen, by, for example, up to 28 points in travel and tourism, 18 points in insurance, and up to 15 points in banking. So if you're being bonused on NPS, it's definitely worth looking at delights as something to see whether you can increase your NPS scores through there. But in all seriousness, it's also going to drive your brand distinctiveness and the experience. So that's wrapping up on delights. And I think that's probably, I'm looking at the clock, we've got 3 minutes to go. It's really rushed through, but let me wrap up. It's time to wrap up, I think. Let me recap on what we've talked about today. Hopefully some of the highs as well as the lows. So we talked about liquid expectations, how things are rising, right? They're becoming more fluid. People are comparing brands and experiences across sectors. That's raising the game somewhat. We took a bit of a journey through alphas and Generation Alpha, who are, experienced natives, very tech driven, but also very experiential driven. And we saw that, as well as directly influencing household purchases, they're a fantastic window for inspiring us on where experiences are heading. And two big key opportunities came out of that, two big threads for you to consider to drive your brand differentiation and relevance. One is personalized journeys, and the other is, of course, a splash of delight, signature delights. So it'd be great to work with you. We've done some really interesting work in this area. It's really pushing, a change in terms of the way customer experience is being done today. So I hope you find it interesting. And over to Bronwyn to sign us off, I think.
Thanks so much, Scott and Christoph, for that look into how the new generation is reshaping customer experience. So I'm going to open the floor in the few minutes that we have left to any questions. So anything you'd like to ask Scott and Christoph, please just pop it into the chat. We did actually already see a few questions coming in. So I'll start with Jesse Redden's question, which is, are there any insights on how this relates to the utilities or aviation industry through these conversations? And I'll actually expand that to just other industries in general.
I can I can talk a little bit on. I think we can both talk a little bit on aviation, Christoph.
You do, you do.
um, Briefly, yes. I mean, just that figure there we had. I think travel, aviation. It's got a. I mean, for obvious reasons, it's got a massive potential to put more delight in it, put those peaks in. I think for airlines, it's really interesting because digital innovation throughout the experience, in flight, in the lounges, is becoming a glue that kind of connects that journey in really interesting ways, and also offers the opportunity for personalization and creating maybe more of a story for people, so that maybe what they're watching on the TV in the plane also relates to their destination, maybe what they buy from duty free. You can see that that's starting to connect together in a much more holistic way, which I think resonates with many of the themes we've seen here. That would be my take on aviation.
Great, thank you. We also have a question which is about the role of brand itself. Is this also changing for this generation, given the evolving customer experience? So, for example, streamlining the XP initiatives. So, what is the role of brand in this flux customer experience?
Yeah, I think this is another story that somehow works in isolation from branding. How you do build a brand, of course, to become meaningful through different interactions. So to us, this whole story is about making sure that you create much more opportunities to be meaningful and build your brand by not just by claiming, by behaving as such. And also, if you talk about signature delight moments, is of course branded signature delight moments. We're currently working for a client, Legoland, where we take the brand design principles we just outlined, but of course somehow present them within the Legoland lens, and somehow work with the combination of these more generic design principles and what the Legoland experience should be like, to then come up with these signature delight moments that work most for that particular brand. So these two go really hand in hand.
Okay, great. I think try to fit a few more in. We've got some really great questions. I know we're running out of time. But Steph asks, so with Gen Alpha and liquid expectations, will online stores evolve into truly personal journeys where every customer gets a curated homepage, tailored offers and rewards rather than just a generic catalog?
Yeah, a couple of things on Gen Alpha. I think from the Gen Alpha research we did, I mean, the thing that surprised me is that when I went into the Gen Alpha research, I guess I had well, I've got some Gen Alphas here as well, but they're always on, iPads and things. So I thought digital, but it seems like the omni-channel story is even more pronounced with that generation. They are starting to realize that it's not all screens. And so I think there's with retail and these areas, there's a lot of opportunity to mix, offline and online. I would also say that, yeah, when we've been looking at experiences, and if you look at, I guess, some of the latest UX testing, for example, that people are talking about, is really quite different. It makes traditional websites look quite clunky, quite fixed. Even Amazon, it's starting to look quite blocky and fixed when you start to put large language models into the mixture, and essentially the possibility that everyone can land on a different web page with much more emotive content that's personalized to them. I think we're going to see that some of the websites of the past start to look in the next 5 years a bit clunky and a bit generic, as we said. Yeah.
Mm,
So yeah, I don't want to answer your question, but yeah, absolutely. I think that's the sort of direction we're going to be seeing. But it will mix with the offline world as well. I think we're going to have to see how these things cross over as well.
mm. And I think this question kind of speaks to that as well. Edwin wants to know if, in your view, an AI powered chat for something like a product onboarding would be sufficient personalization to clients, or would it need to extend far beyond that?
I, I can answer that, Christopher. I think it's going to have to go beyond that. I mean, what we've seen in the global survey we did on experiences is that, yes, people are open to technology and AI. Some people are more than others to improving, to personalizing. But a big theme that comes out is people are saying, look, I want the human touch. So it's almost like as technology rises, people realize the value of the human touch. And that's particularly true, I think, for what I would call more strategic decision making. So wealth and health, those are the sort of interactions where people particularly want that human touch. So I think it's going to be really interesting. It's not just a question of getting an AI chatbot. I think there's a lot of other things to figure out, which for researchers is really interesting, of course.
Yeah. And just to add, it's not just about, let's say, creating efficiencies, but it's about really becoming more meaningful. Also looking into the personalization design principles we added, there's a lot of emotionality involved, which by just having a chatbot, you will not tick that box. There's much more to it.
I just noticed as well, sorry to butt in, Brom. I noticed Luann had a question in the chat on insurance, and we've got quickly time to answer. But yeah, elevating peaks in the insurance industry. I work a lot in insurance. It's my sort of area. But what we've discovered in insurance is that I guess more life insurance, the experience we've had, and health insurance, things like that. But really linking to the broader things that are important in people's lives. So, for example, like a policy renewal for many companies or insurers is quite transactional. It's just like, here you go, pay for your annual premium. But actually linking that to, what's happened in your life this year, what milestones, what celebrations, what's going on in your world, and that's where we've had a lot of success, I would say, linking the transactional journey up to what's going on in their world. Yeah, as we said.
Mm. Great. Thanks so much, Scott and Christoph. We do have some really great questions. Unfortunately, we're out of time. So I would just encourage everyone to pop through any further questions or feedback. And I'm sure Scott and Christoph will get back to us after the
Absolutely.
fact.
Yes, we'll
So
answer in the chat. No problem. Yeah.
great. So as mentioned, we have recorded the session. So we'll share that with you within the next 24 hours. We do have a QR code on the screen, so this will take you to just a super quick feedback survey on today's session. If you could just take the time to please complete that, we'd love to know what you thought. It should just take you 3 minutes. So yes, thanks so much for listening. I hope that everybody found it useful and interesting. I certainly did. Please, again, feel free to contact us. We'd love to hear your questions, thoughts, and feedback. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. Thanks.